Hello, and welcome to the MentorDINO podcast. I'm your host, Katelyn Rossier. I am an architect and founder of MentorDINO. Join me each week as I speak with amazing professionals in and around the architecture, engineering, and construction industry, as we are all part of a larger interconnected community. We discuss everything from career stories, lessons learned, and advice for others finding their own unique career path. Thank you to all of our current subscribers, and if you're new, welcome to the conversation. And if you like this episode, please do me a favor by hitting subscribe, like, or share it with a friend. It really helps others be able to discover this resource and support them on their own unique career journey. On today's episode of the MentorDINO podcast, I would like to welcome Emily Milliman, owner of Milliman Design Studio and landscape architect in Raleigh, North Carolina. Thank you, Emily, for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thank you so much for the invitation, and I am really excited. I've been watching what you've been doing with MentorDINO, and I am really excited to have a conversation today.
Yeah, so let's start out with my loaded question. And introducing yourself to my audience, because I've been following you for a while, knowing what you're doing, what's going on in your own business. So if you don't mind letting my listeners know a little bit about your experience and journey so far in your education and career.
Sure. I'm Emily. I am a landscape architect and founder of Milliman Design Studio. I have been working for about 12 years in the landscape architecture field, and have worked in a range of different size firms on a really wide range of project types, from public plazas to public trails and residential communities to international resorts and hospitality projects. And what I really love about landscape architecture is that it's been a great blend of creativity, problem solving, and learning just how to make life better for people and how to connect them more with nature, which I feel like today is needed more than ever.
Yeah, and I know, so you mentioned you've worked in a variety of scale firms. If you're going to look for a job as a landscape architect, what are the options? Like, I know for building architects like myself, you got your solopreneurs, small firms, the mega firms. I've worked at a mega firm. We've got landscape architects internally. But then I've only ever seen solo entrepreneurs like yourself as consultants. So when you're learning and growing, what are the options?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say it's fairly similar to architecture in what I've observed. And I worked for very small, what you would call micro firms of about 4 people to, when I was up in Boston, I worked for Crosby, Schlesinger and Smallridge, which was on average, of course, of people coming and going over the time that I was there, about 12 people with 3 principals. That felt to me like the most conducive, or it kind of, that model of practice seemed to fit me the best. After that, I definitely have worked in engineering firms as well, that had landscape architecture departments within those, and there's different considerations to look at across the board, like whether you're working for a small firm or a large firm. And it's funny, when I was transitioning from the 12-person firm to a larger firm, I had all these ideas about what would, the grass is always greener on the other side, right? And and it's just a different set of challenges and opportunities that come with each of those scales of practice. So,
yeah, I had a principal that said what was the exact statement? He would say, the grass isn't always greener on the other side. It's just a different shade of green. And I'm like, that is perfect, because you're still dealing with the same struggles. If you talk to somebody in a small firm or a large firm, the scale of
issues may be different, but the issues tend to still be the same, or the complaints. Like it's not like you're a whole different world type scenario.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think like looking back, if I were to start my career again, like I would talk to more people in different scales of practice and think about like my own strengths and where I want to go in, like what I want to focus on, and like whether those opportunities would align closely with that. But there's also something to be said for trying something new that you don't have any idea about and jumping in, because sometimes it ends up being something that you love. So
yeah. And I want to jump back to how you learned about landscape architecture. So, little backstory behind this question. Whenever I was applying to architecture school, I did not get into Penn State right away, and they said go into landscape architecture. And I said, I know nothing about plants and didn't go that route because my knowledge of landscape architecture was so limited. I just think of landscaping, trees, plants. I don't know the difference between them, so I wouldn't go down that road. So how did you learn about landscape architecture as a career path and decide to study?
Yeah, so I started out majoring in architecture, and I ended up completing that undergrad degree at Miami. And I think, it was really serendipitous because my sophomore year, we took as kind of a general requirement course within the architecture program, we took a intro to landscape and urban design course that was really all about learning how to situate architecture within the site and take the attributes and the characteristics of the site and use them to enhance architecture and make it just a much richer experience for the occupants. And after taking that class, I just found myself like, when I was in the middle of it, I just found myself like, I want to spend all my time on that class, like look at the sites, just analyze the heck out of each one, and just like really connect with the natural features of the site, topography, the tree canopy, the light, the texture, materiality. And so that I would say that was the spark that introduced me to the field of landscape architecture. And then I just sort of followed that spark of inspiration throughout undergrad, and led me to select design studios within the architecture program that were more focused on the site aspect of architecture, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And in my junior year, I had the opportunity to study abroad in Florence, Italy. And that was really the first time that I was in a pedestrian-oriented environment, urban, historic. And I just, riding my bike to studio in the heart of the historic city center, like those daily actions allowed me to pick up on all the details of the steps from the street up to the plazas, the cathedral, just the plinths that the cathedrals were on, how people were moving throughout the city. And at the same time, I remember we had this Professor Rocky Rogero who was absolutely so passionate about all of the churches and historic architecture around the city. And I kept thinking, like, every tour, I was like, I want to hear about the plaza. I want to hear about the landscape and, like, the gardens. And anyway, so, again, I just kept following that spark. And, and then I graduated. And actually, it's funny because, so I graduated in 2009 and was really difficult to find the job. And I had kind of known that I wanted to pursue landscape architecture. So I took a year, moved back home, worked actually in a law firm, and applied to grad school, applied to 9. Wasn't planning on going to Harvard. And that was the one that came through with the best opportunity. And so I did that. And I think from there, my understanding of what landscape architecture could be was expanded even more. It went from, kind of the smaller scale residential backyard gardening site kind of contained. And we did, in the early stages of the program, work on like small, like urban plazas and specific sites. But ultimately, towards the end of the program, we ended up looking at like regional scale infrastructure design and how natural systems could be actually enhanced with infrastructure that's designed to support them, which I just found it was like one of the hardest things that I've done working on projects at that scale, but it's really interesting to me to kind of tie it back. And one of the things that I love about landscape architecture is the zooming in, the zooming out, because like some days I'll be working on a detail for a railing, and then other days I'll be working on a diagram showing accessibility across the campus. So I love that back and forth of working at the different scales.
Yeah, I love that you can still get into the details, because I think that's why I don't like urban design. It's like too broad. Like I'm a very detail oriented person that like I want to understand how the individual moves, not like masses move. But I also studied in Florence and also took Rocky's class. So he is fantastic. He also does stuff virtually online now. And I'm like, I'm tempted to take it again, even though I'm not there to see things and walk the city at the same time. But phenomenal professor over there. And I didn't go to Miami. I went to Kent. So he must be just grabbing all the American students that study in Florence and just doing walking tours.
I actually studied abroad through the Kent State program. So that makes a lot of sense.
That always. Yeah. I was like, I couldn't remember if Miami was up there. I knew Syracuse went to Florence. I think Syracuse went to Florence.
Yeah. They have a different campus, I think, within the city, but yeah.
Yeah. No, but amazing professor. So if anybody needs some interesting history walkthrough on Florence, definitely look up Rocky.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And see what he's up to.
Now.
Yeah. I saw that a few years ago. But with the different scales, it sounds like you can also go a commercial or a residential route. Are you able to blend those two as you work for different size firms, or does one tend to lean one or the other?
I would say it's not very, I would say typically they're separate. But there are a few firms that do work in both markets, or with those types of clients. I think it's, I wouldn't say it's easier, but the timeline of the two projects is very different. So in one sense, like working on the residential projects is really can be gratifying because the timeline is shorter for construction, from design to construction. Whereas like on the larger projects, it might take 2 to 3 or sometimes as much as 9 or 10 years to see a project get built. And I really like being involved in projects from start to finish. So that's been one perk of working on residential projects. I think the client relationship also develops in a different way because you're working with a family, a couple, or an individual more closely rather than a team of, say, other professionals and a team potentially of people on the client side. So there's a closer interpersonal relationship, which often comes with emotions and personal preferences. So I think, like for me, my long-term vision is to take on select residential projects with sites that are really interesting to me and people that have aspirations and values that align with mine, and then balance that with larger scale work. So,
yeah. And that goes along with the economy of scale between like project sizes, project types. Plus, like I usually tell young professionals, like when they start out, to try not to just get on the large project because it's going to take you a really long time to see it all the way through. But having a, if you're on a large project, try to get on a micro project too, so you can see start to finish a little bit faster and learn. So you're not like never hitting construction for like the first 2 years of your career, because some projects take that long just to get through design and documentation.
Yeah. And I think I was so lucky in having that opportunity to work on smaller projects and see it from concept through construction administration on a couple of projects when I was working at CSS. And it just, it had such a big impact on like how I design, how I approach projects, how I think about what we're doing from any phase, really. Like now as a consultant, I'll sometimes not be involved in the whole project, but in just a particular phase. But having that overall vision really helps to be strategic within each phase.
Yeah.
About like what makes the most sense. What's the, what do we need to know now? What do we don't need to know now? Kind of like, when it comes down to material and detailing, for example, like if you're in concept design development, it doesn't always make sense to call out certain things in the detail. And so having that understanding of like what's required for pricing, for example, and things like that, has been super helpful.
Yeah. And what inspired you to start your own firm?
Well, I'll start out saying that I never really planned to start my own business. I had always heard that the entrepreneurship route was hard. You're going to be working 60 to 80 hours. You have to hustle, like all of these things. And I just, a couple of years ago, right before I started, a couple of things just kind of aligned. And I had this opportunity with a part-time consulting gig. And I felt like it was just like, if I don't try this now, I might never try it. And it's kind of the perfect time because I just felt like, if not now, when? And so it was more of a curiosity. And also I had felt like I haven't yet found a model of practice that aligned with my my physical body, my life, my the energy and practice, and that would allow me to practice in a way that brought out the best design, the energy, and was sustainable over the rest of my life. So that was kind of the spark. And I will say, like, I think having stepped out on my own, I've learned a lot of different things. For one, it's allowed me to diversify my skill set in terms of, previously I was primarily doing design work and CA, which kind of is, I consider it a little bit of a bridge between design and business, actually. But it's just allowed me to branch out and like do different things. Like there's no typical day running a business, as I'm sure you know. But and that has felt at times really good and at times like really challenging. But over the course, I feel like it's allowed me to level up and kind of like also get over a little bit of perfectionism. And like when there's accountability and you're on your own, like you have to figure things out and make it work. And I think it's allowed me to also reflect on what's important to me, like what kinds of projects do I want to take on, because ultimately I decide, do I want to work with this team or, you know, is this type of project aligned with my skill set and values? So
Yeah, you get more control of what projects you're working on rather than, hey, a principal says, hey, a project came in, you have time, this is what you're doing.
A little bit. I thought so too, like at first, but now that you're saying that, like I feel like there's definitely also an aspect of balancing revenue, sources and like, like sometimes if an opportunity comes up, like you just have to take it. But I think that kind of feeds into the loop of, if you're marketing yourself, you can take that into consideration, like who are the people that you're trying to reach. And honestly, like I hadn't really thought that much about marketing before, and like kind of the client facing side. I think actually one of the biggest realizations and things that I've been working through on the business side is like a lot of times I feel like we're so focused in our design work that we sometimes lose sight or have different priorities than the client might have. And so I think communication is the biggest thing there, like asking lots of questions, understanding like what their goals are, and and not getting so tied up in the weeds sometimes.
Yeah, because definitely I've learned, I'm now on year 3 of MentorDINO, and like I've learned so much on like marketing, social media, getting myself out there and talking. Like for me, my client is architects and trying to help architects. And it's like, it's weird putting a different lens on myself, if that makes sense, since myself is the client. That sounds really weird, but like until you think of that way,
like it's a shift of perspective, right? Like
exactly. And if you're going to go talk to clients or branding on your website, the branding on your website isn't a design portfolio, and it's not meant to do that. Like you are talking to clients, the amount of architects I see that are just spitting out Archie speak and throwing stuff. I'm like, you're just trying to prove yourself to the other architects and designers. That's not bringing you work. The point of your website is to get clients interested in what you're doing. And so speaking their language and understanding what their concerns are is different than just, here's a pretty project and now I'm going to pretend like I'm in studio again trying to present an idea. And so it's different.
So what have been the like, how have you dug into that to kind of figure out what they're looking for or interested in for MentorDINO?
Yeah, it's all pain points. So it's, really focusing in and harping on, what are the challenges that we see? What are questions people asking? And I think the hard part about architecture is we're such a niche market. Like you can't use AI and some other marketing tools like you can, because we search in different words. We're using different words in our searches. So understanding what tools I can and can't use to help me find what people are asking, and then just having different conversations with professionals, not just, hey, look at this great piece of architecture. It's, hey, how are you doing? Do you need help understanding this detail? Asking different questions to seeing how people respond, so they're not hiding. I remember like I've had a lot of imposter syndrome in my past. I've, had perfectionism and wanting something to be perfect, and you stay up all late working on a perfect detail, and you don't need to. It needs to be enough because you're talking to a contractor. You're not presenting a perfect design. You're presenting to a contractor how you need to build and the design intent, and not over detailing something. Like you mentioned with what do you need to draw to get a cost estimate properly? You may not need to go and do that specific detail, but you can give them enough information so they can get linear feet, a basis of design, and they can get a cost per linear foot to it. And they can go from there. And so it's educating where those gaps are And I think the hardest part's finding the blind spots where you can't see the blind spot when you're driving your car. And it's like, what blind spots do I have that I'm missing? And it's so hard to find them.
Yeah, I feel like that particular challenge it becomes really helpful to talk to people outside of architecture and design, because just getting their off the cuff response or impression on whether it's a proposal or the way that you're pitching something can be so helpful, like you're saying, in terms of like reaching your premium client. So
yeah. And I know one thing I've struggled with is I'm trying to help early and mid-career architects, and sometimes you don't know what you don't know, but the firm owners and leadership and most of the mid-career architects understand these struggles, but those early career professionals don't. So I always have to market to firm owners, but I'm helping somebody else. And so from your firm, because you offer different services, because you could work directly with a client, you could work as a design consultant to an architecture firm, and then you also have fractional design services. So there's different clients that you're focusing on. So what are all these services and how are you focusing your marketing on it, since we're on a marketing discussion?
Yeah, so I do work, I offer fractional landscape architecture services, which basically means, if a firm is looking for additional support at any phase of a project, they can reach out to me and I can plug in and help them with a particular phase or multiple phases. And what I've seen is that there seems to be a shortage of mid-career landscape architects in the profession for a number of reasons, whether it's economic recession, or just in general, people leaving the field for one reason or another. And that's where I'm at. And so I saw an opportunity to help firm owners and support them when, maybe they might not be quite ready to hire a full-time employee to round off their team, but they definitely need kind of a boost of design power, as I like to call it, mid-process. So
yeah, is that more you being like a 1099 to them as like a contractor, or are they holding the word is escaping me, where you're charging them, hey, up front you can hold this bucket of money and it accounts for this many hours, and then when you use it again, then you would charge that next bucket level? I don't know why I'm blanking on words today. But you know what I mean.
It really varies from firm to firm, and I try and tailor the structure in terms of whether it's a 1099 or a retainer.
Thank
option.
you. Retainer was the word I wanted. I was like, recording on a Friday and a Friday brain.
Yeah, it really depends on the firm, and like I said, like I'm on my own right now, so I'm very flexible, and would like to keep it that way. But that's also an interesting thing. Like I'm finding like firms are structured differently in terms of that setup and how they work with external consultants. So that's been another really interesting thing to see across the field.
Yeah, and I haven't seen retainers as much. I've seen that. This could be me, more naive side of me, but more in the last year, seeing that concept of having a retainer. Like if you've got a big university client, you could be on retainer to them rather than waiting for every little tiny project they send you, as a different way to structure fees.
Yeah. I think the closest thing that I have seen retainer model in a few circumstances. What I will say is more common is for clients like universities to create a short list of on-call landscape architects. That's probably similar to what you were talking about, where they can have a list of qualified teams or professionals, firms, and call on them when project needs arise. What the retainer model offers is more alignment, and with me and my services, and it allows us to plan over a longer period of time, so that I can be available as much as they need. So sometimes it takes a little bit more planning, and not all projects offer that convenience of knowing when the next phase is going to start, but some do. And yeah, so.
Yeah. And so for even the full design services, how many different projects are you doing at any one time?
Right now I have a handful, I would say under 5, mix of residential. Right now I have a healthcare project as well for a medical office building site. And I'm also working with a couple of fractional landscape architecture clients. Mostly right now it's other landscape architects, but definitely open to supporting engineers or architects as an in-house landscape architect without the overhead of a full-time employee. So, yeah.
Yeah. And how have you found that being with your work-life balance, since you had the impression of, if I go off on my own, I'll be working 60, 70-hour weeks? What's it actually like?
I will say it hasn't been overwhelming in the number of hours I'm working so far. And I think when there is an uptick in work, having flexibility to work at times when I feel most energized has allowed me to maintain that workload, and also fit in pockets of self-care, exercise, all those little important things that in my previous experience working for a full-time firm, and I think like this is becoming really apparent as something that women are looking for in the workplace, is that flexibility, that ability to move pieces around, to maybe do things in a different way. I'm thinking, like working asynchronously or providing updates to your team without being on a Zoom call, meeting after meeting after meeting, and just honoring our energy and how we feel so that we can come, with our best designer hat on. So,
yeah. And definitely pick and choose what we're doing, or just life changes. So I'm a new mom, and daycares now, it's not what it used to be. You used to be able to drop them off at 6 and pick them up at 6, based on where I could get my daughter into, and she couldn't get in till she was almost 6 months old. The time I can't physically drop her off, get to the office, work 8 hours, drive to go pick her up, and get to her in time by the time they close. And that's including working through my lunch. It's physically not possible for one person to do it. And so it's, hey, I need flexibility. Maybe I can log in for an hour later, or maybe I just need to be an employee that's 30 to 36 hours a week for a couple years. But that doesn't make me any less of an architect. And it's, making sure that there's time in there. I don't want to be late to a meeting with a client. I don't want to let go of my standards of quality, but seeing the flexibility on what you can do when you have control of your calendar and make time for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's so, when you make that transition, becoming a mom or navigating health challenges or whatever it is that you're dealing with personally, I feel like those of us who are in tune and aware and navigating those challenges are actually probably going to be better architects, because they can calibrate, you're not going to be working when you're exhausted. You're going to be giving, like I said before, like you're going to be working at times when you have your best energy, or maybe you don't have your best energy, but you acknowledge that. And like that awareness, I think, brings so much richness, not only to design, but firm culture. So,
yeah. And I know with MentorDINO, I get more freedom if I'm not feeling well. Then it's, what is the bare minimum I need done? Do I have a podcast episode coming out this week that I just need to get that done? And that's it. And you know what? A social media post isn't going to happen on Wednesday, but I got the bare minimum done. And other days I have a lot of energy that I'm like, yeah, I'm going to plow through my social media posts for the next 2 weeks and fly through. And maybe I don't take as long of a lunch break, but like you're in that design, passion, energy just mode, and you can just keep going, but giving yourself grace when you know you need it is so important. And I think that's sometimes what's missing when you're at a standard like 9 to 5, you have to be at your desk or in front of your laptop all day type scenario.
Absolutely. Yep. 100% agree.
And how's being a business owner changed your view on design?
I think there are like a couple of main ways that my perspective has changed. One being workflows. So thinking about software that we're using for different tasks. And also, if I'm being honest, like as a small firm owner, I don't have access to like a large format plotter. So finding those external resources and then it's allowed me to be creative and find ways to eliminate or kind of like strategically position those needs at certain points of the projects and work digitally. And it's interesting because I do really like going back and forth between hand drawing and working on the computer. So that's been interesting because I love to draw by hand on trace, and you know how trace allows you to kind of iterate and work through concepts and take elements of the first concept and bring it forward through the 10th concept.
Mm-hmm.
And you
can crunch up the paper and throw it in the trash can when you're angry with it.
I'm waiting for them to come out with a recyclable version of trace one of these days. Whoever can do that, I will be your first customer. But yeah, I absolutely love trace paper, but moving without a plotter, it is sometimes more challenging. So I've learned to use Morpholio trace, which works in a similar way and integrates into Photoshop very easily with the layer structure. Yeah, I mean, when I think about working with fractional clients, like utilizing IT to help us navigate having access, like working on the same server versus emailing files back and forth, and like optimizing file transfer or collaboration across teams that are not necessarily all in-house, like you would have in maybe an engineering firm that has landscape and structural or things like that. And then we kind of touched on the second point, which comes down to communicating with people outside of the design profession. And I think what you said about like the language, the words that we're using, and I mean, even down to when I think about like residential projects, communicating the expectations and the way that the design process works, and kind of distinguishing between sometimes it's design build, and sometimes I find that's more common on the residential scale of projects, simply because of, there is usually there are smaller sites, and there's usually a smaller budget, so that doesn't always allow for the full development of construction documents. But just like working with people to help them understand like what information we have. For example, I'm working on a residential project right now, and we're taking a design build approach, and they have questions like, who's going to handle the permitting and what do we need to be able to get to that point? And so they're a lot of times interested in the end result. And I am focused on what's needed at each stage, but also the end result in terms of design features, materiality, that kind of thing. So it's kind of a balance. And honestly, I feel like I've gotten to observe a really interesting temperature gauge on the profession broadly, mostly when it comes to smaller firms and micro practices, but also some of the small and mid-sized firms who are navigating challenges like in my fractional work.
With like hiring or like getting project work clients, like or something else.
A lot of it's studio culture, like what we were talking about before, like what's working, what's not working. Feedback on like different types of clients and their priorities. And I think just an overall energy gauge of like, this is how we've been practicing, and this is what I'm seeing as professionals who have been in practice for, mostly mid-level professionals in landscape architecture, but there's themes that I've observed, and there's trends, and that almost is like it just gives me so much inspiration for shaping my own practice and like what I want to see and how I want to do things differently. So
yeah, now that I think we're at, like, I think COVID, even though now we're 5 years after COVID, it created a tipping point between differences between generations and what they want to do to work and what work means. And I think, I hate saying work-life balance, but like integrating life into somebody's life is more important than work now with the younger generations, and the more senior generations not knowing how to work in a different environment that isn't you're typically coming into the office 5 days a week. And so I think we're definitely at a pivot point where some firms just have to pick what is the structure that firm wants to run with. And they may lose some people. It's the same thing as if a firm gets bought out, you're going to lose some people because they're not going to like the new culture of getting bought out. But there's a cultural alignment that needs to happen, and people are afraid to move because they loved the culture they used to have, or they love the people. So it's hard to pivot sometimes. I'd also advocate, like, I'm part-time right now and I love it. And I could probably need to work more hours, but if I were to structure a firm and grow it, I would not have employees at 40 hours a week. I would have them closer to like a 36 model or 36, and giving that flex, because sometimes when you have to push to get to a deadline, and sometimes you have to and put in more hours. If you had to push and your hours only got to 40 hours a week rather than 50, 60, like that push doesn't seem as much of a strain on your family. But if you're lower on work or you're not on a deadline, it's, hey, you get that Friday afternoon to go have you time, or make sure you have time to schedule appointments during work days and take that respite.
That's huge. Yeah.
Or if you need to spread it out and it's, hey, 5 days a week you're still working, but you're only doing 7-hour days, it gives you that flexibility. If you have transitioned to be a parent like I have, like, that model helps, because then the push doesn't seem as draining because you're not dipping into that sacred time. And just structuring it a little bit differently and taking time for people and understanding people may not be able to go into the office every single day, but knowing when it makes sense. If I'm teaching a young professional, it's, hey, let's get in the office. It's a little bit easier to explain or sit side by side when doing something. Whereas other things, I've had virtual rooms up. We've had a deadline. I've had 3 professionals. We just stayed on Teams, blocked off our whole calendar, and it felt like we were sitting next to each other because you could just turn and ask a question as you were drawing and detailing, and you didn't have to like stop and type, but you could build culture too because you're learning about each other. And it's, hey, what are you guys working on this weekend? And it's that same conversation. So there's different ways to restructure. And I think we're definitely at a tipping point. And as a consultant, you can see that a lot more because you're working with so many different firms.
Yeah. I think that's definitely true. And yeah, I think it comes down to like self-awareness and like when you're working with teams, like knowing how you work best. And if if like knowing what you don't know versus like, at the beginning, sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And so just having conversations around like with whoever you're working with, I think is super helpful, whether it's on Teams or in person. And yeah, I think, there's definitely ways, to structure, to restructure our day so that we are working efficiently, but also in a creative and inspired way.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to let my dog out of my office before I ask this last question because he's already started scratching the door. So I'm going to do that, or else my podcast editor is going to yell at me. He'll be like, why didn't you let the dog out? I don't usually have him in here, but he was passed out. So I was like, okay, fine. But all right. Okay. And I always like wrapping up my podcast with this final question. And it's, what advice do you have for young professionals just starting their careers?
Oh, that's interesting. I would say, number one, think about every experience you have as an opportunity. So I'm thinking about like when I was an undergrad at Miami, I had the opportunity to work at the art and architecture library, which I thought, okay, I'm just going to be like checking books out and, I can do my homework on the side. I think the librarians were okay with that. And I remember, that was my junior year, and I remember going to shelve books, and I put a bunch away, and then I would take a bunch out because I was so curious. And I ended up just like combing through the graphic design section and becoming totally enthralled with the layouts, the photography, and just like soaking in and like taking that time to learn and observe how books were put together. And then it actually, going into senior year, I remember taking a portfolio class, and that experience of seeing those publications actually was, it kind of soaked into my subconscious. And so like the decisions that I was making about layout, about color and, imagery and things like that, like that really helped me a lot in figuring out, how I wanted my portfolio to look. And, and I would have never guessed that would have happened when I started working at the library. And then the second thing is, I would say for me, coming out of graduate school, I remember thinking like, just find your people, just find people that you love working with or that you think you would love working with, which that's another conversation, in terms of like, when you start a job, you don't really know,
Mm-hmm.
So whether you're going to get along with the people, but you can kind of follow your intuition, which is what I've done so far in my career. And I will say that, so find your people and the work will align. I think like there's a lot of commonalities between different kinds of work, from public plazas and parks and streetscapes, and private work, private development, adaptive reuse, developer-driven work, to resort planning. Like there's so many different applications, but there are a lot of common threads. And I think to me, like the bottom line is like, it's all site design. It's all materials plans, concepts, grading. Like there's some foundational things in landscape architecture that apply across the board. So there's definitely like cultural differences between different types of clients and different design teams. But that's really, that kind of mantra has kind of helped me find people that I enjoy working with. And my last piece of advice would be that saying no is just as important as saying yes. And when you receive a no, consider it redirection, not rejection. And that's been a huge thing for me to kind of soak in and embrace as a business owner, because you get no's all the time. And what, like I'm saying, it just kind of, it steers you, it helps to steer you in the right direction with people that are aligned and want to, do the same kind of work that you want to do. So.
Yeah. Not trying to take it personally. It's okay, move on and get used to.
Which is so hard because in design, I feel like particularly in creative fields, we put a lot of our heart and mind into the work. And so.
Yeah. And you get excited, like, okay, I definitely want to work with this client. I already said yes to them. And it's got to be a mutual understanding to move forward.
For sure.
Yeah. And if anybody's looking for any landscape architecture help, have you help them on their project or looking for a fractional landscape architect, what's the best way to get a hold of you or find you?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I am really excited about growing Milliman Design Studio, and I would love to talk to you if you're interested in either considering us for a RFP or proposal for a project, or if you are on the fractional side and need in-house or need temporary support on your projects. I am on LinkedIn and Instagram, more so on LinkedIn, but always happy to set up schedule a call or a coffee if you're local here in Raleigh. So.
Yeah, and I'll put your website, your LinkedIn, your Instagram all in the show notes. So it's really one-stop shop to be able to find you and connect. And it was fantastic learning from you today, Emily, hearing about your journey and how it's going as an entrepreneur.
Thank you, Katelyn. So fun to talk to you today.
I hope you enjoyed our discussion today. Learn some advice to take with you and see how our industry is all tied together to create the world around us. Check out the description below for any links or resources we discussed. If you liked the episode, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. Give me a thumbs up and leave a comment below. It really helps others be able to discover this resource and support finding that career path that best works for them. If you know someone that has inspired your own career that you'd like me to interview, let me know in the comments below, or you can reach out to me via my website or LinkedIn. I'd be happy to share their story or your own. Thank you again, and I cannot wait for the next career story I get to share with you next week.